here we use live ammunition in rooms with 360 degrees arcs of fire. We are the only ones who do this.
They leave explosives outside a window and just get away in time.
So we built these defensive positions called hedgehogs out of oil drums, ammunition containers, sandbags, and that was our fort. That's where we fought from. And at night, I'd see the green tracer going in, the red tracer coming out, the explosions in the air, 3.5 to 4 miles away, up in the Jebel, the mountains. And I'd say to my sergeant, "Who's that up there?" And he's like, "That's an SAS patrol getting hit and getting stuck in." And I'm like, "Who are the SAS?" "Oh, that's the Special Air Service. They're our special forces." And from that moment on, at 17 years old, I never even shaved. I looked like a 14-year-old. I was way behind in puberty. I was just like a little kid given an SLR. From that moment on, and I remember it vividly today, looking up in those mountains with a big grin on my face, saying, "That's where I want to be." And I remember my NCOs just slapping my head and saying, "You're still wet behind the ears. You've got a lot to learn yet." Well, I did 2 tours to Dhofar with the RAF regiment. And I was 19 on my second tour. And I applied for the regiment then. And I just passed my 20th birthday when I turned up in the January in the mid-1970s to do SAS selection. Back in those days, it was about 125 to a course. My course was smaller. It was just under 100. I think it was about 97, 98. Simply because of what the Brits were doing around the world at that time. It wasn't that the units weren't willing to release their lads to go on selection. It was that the lads weren't getting time to do their own personal training before attending selection. So it was a smaller course by probably about 30 students. And at the end of it, 5 of us and an officer, a great officer, passed. And I think they saw me as a blank canvas and thought, wow, this lad, he's keen, he's very fit, he's reasonably bright. We can take him and mold him into one of our own, because I can't think for the life of me any other reason why they passed me. But it was a blast. And I ended up going back out to Dhofar with one of the last SAS trips before the Dhofar War ended in 1976. So it was a great start, and I got my wish. Looking up in the mountains, watching them in that firefight, I was then stood in those mountains, looking back down at the hedgehogs, Salalah airfield, Salalah town, and the coastline as an SAS soldier.
My mum dragged me down to the careers office, and I did that tick test they had at the time. And I think I equalled the highest they had in Bathgate, which probably isn't saying much. And they said, you can join anything you want. And I remember looking around the office, and there was a picture of a guy in short sleeve a blue shirt. He was all tanned, and he was abseiling down a radar dish in Hong Kong. And I said, I want to be that guy. And I still remember it now. It was a telecommunications systems analyst operator. It was a big title, and I remembered the title. And I went home thinking about this title that I was going to be. And they said, no, it's a year's waiting list, and then it's 2 years training. And it was an RAF job. And my mum said, nah, he's got to be out of the house for the time he's 16. So I joined the infantry 2 weeks later, and I was only about 15 and a half. Which would have been probably one of the youngest soldiers to have joined the British Army. When I first joined, I was too young even to go to Germany, and I was too young to go out to the Gulf the first Gulf when it first started. and I was rear party for the regiment at that time. You'll always have times in your life where you'll hit these crossroads, and it's so easy to go one way or another, and it can have quite an impact on your life. And I've certainly had a few of them. I think if you're from the Paras or Marines or some of the other regiments, you've probably got a good idea of what selection's about, and you'll know somebody that's been in or has just recently come back. I was going from the Royal Scots, so I'm probably the last Royal Scot to have got in the SAS, because they amalgamated not long after that to become one Scots. And so I didn't really know anything about selection. I knew there was a hills phase and that you went to the jungle, and that was about it. And so my training was quite restricted. I think I got a week off to train the week before selection, which wasn't ideal. But, it was... I just sort of made the best of it, and I was lucky. I kept injury free and stuff, and sometimes you need a bit of luck to get through these things. And yeah, I was lucky. I got through. When you do the aptitude phase, the first 4 weeks, it's very progressive. So you'll go in groups. Everybody will get a chance at map reading, and you'll gradually increase it until at the end you're on your own. You're doing your own navigation. You're covering roughly 4 kilometers an hour over the hills, and culminating in probably endurance, which is about 70 kilometers, 68 kilometers in 20 hours. And so your navigation's got to be good, but I think it's got to be better in the jungle. You've got to have micro navigation, you're pacing, and you're trusting in the compass and stuff. And so, yeah, your navigation's a big part of it.
Well, I think your personality goes with you. And if you think you can run away from a problem by moving to somewhere else, you're going to be seriously disappointed, because you go with you. You carry your problems on your own back. You can't change the world. You can only change yourself. And that's the difficult thing. I got in too young. I got in just after my 22nd birthday, which made older men resent me for being there as a young upstart. And I wasn't mature enough to know when to keep my gob shut either. So I would say I expected standards to be somewhat higher. And I voiced those concerns with a view to trying improving it. But I was too young, I was a new boy, and I should just keep quiet. But when you had people coming into rooms to take lessons who didn't understand the basic principles of taking a lesson, let alone the material they were trying to teach. I'll give you one example. I had a staff sergeant, who came to the room to give a mortar fire control lesson when we're going down to the Falklands. And he left out direction and type of fire. Now, if you know anything about the trigonometry of artillery fire, without the direction, you have no idea where the rounds are going to land. It's a piece of mathematics that counts to make sure the bombs land in the right place. And when I complained about it after the lesson, I was told I had a bad attitude. So where do you go with that? The regiment are good at what they do, but they're not necessarily good at everything. They're not knights in white shiny armor. They're not all heroes. Some beat up their wives. Some neglect their kids. But most of them are good soldiers at the jobs they're trained to do and required to do. They're not all as special as the mythology would like to make them.
In my case, we just finished test week, come straight off test week onto officers week. So you're tired anyway. So they've achieved that. You're absolutely knackered. The difficult part about it that I found is that on test week, it's purely objective. I mean, you've just got to make the times. You've just got to make those times and get the grade, and that's on the watch and on the paper. Officers week is much more about whether they like you or not as an officer, and so it's quite hard not to start trying to second guess it. You know what I mean? So they ask you a question or they throw something at you, and you're, instead of just reacting, you're thinking, oh, what do they want me to say? What am I meant to say? Which of course is potentially fatal. But the funny thing was that the one thing that the free fallers absolutely hated was static line, which is what we all were doing. They were fine jumping out at 20,000 feet at night with oxygen and a Bergen on their legs. And oh my God, I don't know how they did it. But you say to them, okay, we're going to jump at 600 feet on a static line. They say, oh my God, no, we don't want to do that. And so, I mean, basically, I rejoined, without having to tell the whole story again, but I mean, I rejoined the British Army because of the First Gulf War. And I was on the staff of Peter de la Billière. And that all came to an end in February 92. And I was offered a job back in the Special Air Service, actually, arranged by Peter, because I was on a TA attachment to do my service with him. And they would convert it back to being a regular commission, blah, blah, blah. And then Tony Buckingham at the same time started Heritage Oil and Gas, which I'd actually helped him a little bit with, and said, no, come on, you've done the whole army thing. It's time you made some proper money. Come and join me in Heritage. I said, okay, I really actually probably ought to try and do that and make some proper money. And lo and behold, what was it, about 7 months later, I was a general in the Angolan army at war. So my attempt at becoming a civilian was an abject failure.